Erik Haltman of RotoWire here with 6 players to pick up this weekend, starting with Spencer Torkleson, first baseman for the Detroit Tigers, who was the first overall pick in the 2020 draft, but looked to have played his way out of a job by now. He has a 693 OPS across 361 career games heading into this year, was demoted midseason last year, and was better, but not all that great after he returned. It got to the point where the team talked about him as if he was merely a candidate for part-time work between first base, DH, maybe even right field, with Colt Keith set to take over as the first baseman. Now, Keith did start at first base on opening day, but Torkelson got to bat cleanup and was the DH. He went 1-for-1 with 4 walks and a homer. That's after he had a 1,069 OPS with 5 homers in 19 spring games. So Torkelson's MLB track record to date doesn't really support a breakout. It's bad surface stats and pretty unremarkable underlying numbers too, but this is just his age 25 season, so it's worth a shot to see if he's made enough adjustments to make good on his prospect pedigree. Up next, we've got Gavin Lux, second baseman for the Cincinnati Reds, although he's been playing third base, so he should be able to get you more eligibility soon. Lux made the decision to start swinging harder in the middle of last season, which is a pretty simple decision, trading some contact for some power, and it really seemed to have worked. His OPS jumped from 562 before the break last year to 899 in the second half. His strikeout rate did rise, going from about 21 to 25%, but his barrel rate jumped from 3.5 to 10%, while his hard hit rate jumped from 37% all the way up to 48%. You'll take that trade-off any day if it's just a little bit of contact for a lot of power. And remember how big of a prospect Lux was before his debut, and remember that he's only 27 years old. This really looks like it could be a mid-career breakout to me, and it's helped by the fact that Lux moved from the Dodgers to the Reds over the offseason, moving from a neutral park to a very hitter-friendly one, and also going to a team where he won't have quite as much competition for at-bats. Lux got to bat cleanup on opening day, which seems to signify that the Reds see him as a key piece, although do be warned that we won't know until Sunday when the Reds face Robbie Ray whether or not Lux will be in the lineup against lefties. If he is a platoon player, maybe it's tough to grab him in shallow leagues, but if he's not, I want him everywhere, and even in those deep leagues, I'll take him if he's starting just against righties. Our third hitter today is Victor Scott, and I'm wondering, was the hype just a little too early for this Cardinals center fielder? Scott stole 94 bases in the minors in 2023, so everyone loved him as a fantasy sleeper in 2024. He even won the opening day job, so he looked pretty smart, and then he posted a 502 OPS in 53 games and was sent back to the minors. Scott had an excellent spring, though, this year, an 1172 OPS, and that saw him win the opening day job again. Now, it helps that Michael Ciani, who had a 570 OPS after taking over the job from Scott last year, also had a 320 OPS this spring, so the top alternative doesn't look like he's any better than the bad version of Scott, and, maybe we'll get the good version of Scott this year. Scott is just 24 years old, so there's reason to believe that he's continuing to grow, and there's no need to conclude that last year's struggles are proof that he's completely overmatched and will never have a big league future ahead of him. He doesn't really hit the ball very hard, although he did have 4 homers this spring, so maybe that's changing. But Scott has the potential to steal 40 bases, 50 bases, as long as he gets every day at bats. The sky's really the limit here. A strong glove eases the pressure on his bat, though we still don't know if Scott can even clear a low offensive bar, so while I do want to go at him, especially anywhere where I need steals, I should be ready to cut bait pretty quickly. I've got 3 more names for you in a minute, but I wanted to mention that if you want far more names than I could ever cover in a video of this length, we have 3 waiver wire articles a week up at rotowire.com, and you can go to rotowire.com/try for a free peek behind the paywall to check those out and check out everything else we've got going on at the site. That's rotowire.com/try. Moving to the mound, we've got Kris Bubic of the Royals, who has won Kansas City's 5th starter job. Bubic has had a really interesting career path. He was a starter from 2020 to 2022 and really struggled, a 4.89 ERA and a 1.53 whip. And then he added a sweeper heading into the 2023 season and showed some promise in 3 starts, but then had to undergo Tommy John surgery. Now, Bubic returned late last year as a reliever and was dominant. 2.67 ERA, 1.02 WHIP, combined a 32% strikeout rate with a 4% walk rate. Among pitchers who threw at least 30 innings, no one else with a strikeout rate that high had a walk rate that low. The sweeper remained part of the repertoire in the bullpen for Bubic, and he actually even more than doubled its usage, really starting to trust the pitch. So is there reason to consider him a totally different pitcher than he was when he struggled in his first 3 years as a starter? I think so, if he's got a whole new pitch that's working quite well for him. I'm not going to bet on Bubic repeating his numbers from relief, but I want to add him now just to see how close he could get. The next pitcher is Ben Brown, who was one of my favorite pitcher sleepers this spring. Brown was in a battle for the Cubs' 5th starter job with the likes of Colin Ray, Jordan Wicks, Javier Assad, but he's the only member of that group with real strikeout upside and the only one who could one day be something more than just a serviceable back-end streamer type. Brown could also be a high-leverage, multi-inning firearm type reliever, which is what he was in the Tokyo series, but it's been confirmed that he will indeed be in the rotation, at least for now. With a couple bad starts, Brown could lose his job once Assad returns from his oblique strain, but there's an opportunity here for Ben Brown to take the job and run with it the rest of the year. Brown paired a strong 28.8% strikeout rate with a decent enough 8.6% walk rate last year, only a hair worse than league average in that category. Other pitchers with very similar strikeout and walk rates last season, Dylan Cease, Cole Reagans. I mean, there's pitchers who combine slightly worse than average walk numbers with quite a lot of strikeouts and make it work as front-end fantasy starters. That's the upside for Brown. Probably not in terms of total workload, given that he also pitched out of the pen last season, but at least on a per-start basis, there's a lot of upside for Brown. The downside is that he's back in the bullpen by mid-April and spends the rest of the year there, but I think this time of year, I want to take a chance on the high upside pitchers, hoping to find one who sticks rather than just cycling through streamers. In the bullpen, I'm sure we're going to see tons of interesting saves over the rest of this opening series, so there may be one or two names that aren't on my radar now who you should be looking at, but my top name after opening day is Jose Alvarado of the Phillies. Now, the intention this spring in the Phillies bullpen was on new free agent signing Jordan Romano. Romano has 105 career saves to his name, and the assumption was that if he could prove this spring that the elbow troubles, which ruined last year for him, are behind him, then Romano would probably get a traditional closer job. And if he couldn't, then the Phillies would probably continue to use the committee that they've used for most of manager Rob Thompson's tenure. Now, Romano did actually have a pretty good spring, but Alvarado had an even better one. He threw 9 scoreless innings, struck out a ridiculous 59% of opposing batters. And so on opening day, Romano actually came out in the 8th inning and gave up 2 runs to tie the game, so not very promising for anybody who picked him. Alvarado looked like he was lined up for the save in the 9th inning. He wound up pitching in the 9th, through a scoreless 9th inning with the score still tied, ended up getting the win. Now, the committee could well come out in a different order in the next game and a yet another different order the game after that, but where we stand right now, I think I'd have to say that Jose Alvarado looks like the Phillies committee leader. He's a big man with big stuff and an inconsistent sense of the zone, which makes him rather streaky. Last year was a down year, so he didn't wind up getting a single save after July 3rd, but that doesn't mean this year will be a down year as well. When Alvarado is on one of his hot streaks, he looks very much at home in the 9th inning and could close for most teams out there. So I would say go get him now and be prepared to drop him in a month or two when he loses his sense of the zone again. That'll do it for today's video. Drop a like if you plan on picking up any of these names, and also check out the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, where Ryan Boyer and I go over waiver wire pickups every single week for the next 6 months.